Today's throwback, why we're having a look at the Mezco Cinema Fear Series 3, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, Thomas Hewitt. Most of us would also refer to him as Leatherface. Thomas Hewitt, an original review that I did many moons ago, I decided, you know what, it was due time to give another glance at Thomas Hewitt. Thomas Hewitt does come with an alternate head. He comes with a little tray of ears, and of course his trusty chainsaw. Flip over the package. You can obviously see as well the packaging has been opened. We will reopen it. Other characters that you can get from the Cinema Fear Series 3, we got Jason Goes to Hell, Jason Voorhees. We got the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, Dream Child, Freddy Krueger. We also have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hitchhiker. And we, of course, have Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Thomas Hewitt. You can go to www.mezcotoys.com if you are interested in checking out some of the things that are coming to us from the good folks at Mezco. What I am going to do is take a break. Package is pretty much already essentially open. What I'm going to do is reopen this. We're going to get this out on display. And when we come back, we're going to get a better look at Thomas Hewitt. Don't go anywhere. More on the way. Once again, the accessories that come with Thomas Hewitt. For starters, you get yourself a small tray of ears. 3 ears. Not 4, so one person is completely deaf, one person is missing just 1 ear. That person should make post-haste before Thomas Hewitt realizes he still didn't get his other ear. It's crude, it's very gross, but an interesting little accessory to include with these. Now, I mean, granted, the problem with any time you get a figure and you get these little small accessories, unless you have like a table or something you could put these on, you're not likely going to put these on maybe a bookshelf by the foot of the character. These are just likely pieces that are ultimately just going to get lost. I suppose it's nice that Mezco included it, but really, when you have nothing that you can do with it, I mean, you could probably have him holding the tray of ears, but I don't know. Just seems like an extra accessory that guaranteed will get lost. Another accessory that Spot didn't mention actually in the packaging is you get yourself a sledgehammer. It's not covered in blood, yet, but likely it will be. Don't worry, not by my own blood. Some nice detail. The sculpt on the handles is solid enough. You can see a bit of a wood grain going on there. There's no additional paint. There's just that singular brown on there. But where they did not add extra paint, at least there's extra paint going on the sledgehammer tip. You can see there's a light silver, there's a bit of a dark silver wash in there as well. Just gives it that real nice metallic, like real world coloring to it. So I think they did a pretty good job on that. Scale wise, I don't know if it might be a little too small in comparison to the character, but then again, Leatherface was pretty big. So, I mean, maybe this, by normal humans' standards, would be a relatively big sledgehammer. It kind of looks like a lollipop in his hand. One accessory that you would expect to come with Leatherface, you get yourself a chainsaw. Oh, no, it's not sharp, don't worry. Spot always uses that joke. One of these days, it's actually going to be sharp and Spot's going to cut himself. But some really nice detail on the chainsaw. I like that this just looks really aged, really, really worn. Again, no blood. No blood or anything. No blood really on Leatherface as a whole or his accessories. Mezco decided, I guess, at the point that they released this figure, just to kind of keep it clean. Now, we have seen Mezco dabble in the horror movie figures before, and sometimes blood didn't always work out for them, putting it on weapons and machetes and knives. It always looked a little too gelatinous, a little too red. So I guess leaving the red off, the blood off here, ended up working out in its favor. Some nice paint overall, though. I really have nothing bad to say about the chainsaw. Nothing bad really at all. And lastly, his last accessory, you have a Thomas Hewitt alternate face. You can see his nose and everything else has started to vacate the face. You may or may not have liked the fact that that this something like this would be shown instead of having Leatherface just completely masked. I mean, it's a nice touch, but really, I mean, anybody out there, any collector out there, sometimes alternate heads are a great idea, but really at the end of the day, who would ever display their Leatherface with the Thomas Hewitt face? Anybody? Anybody at all? I know I wouldn't. That's really on par with the NECA Halloween remake Michael Myers. It came with the alternate face that had him wearing the pumpkin mask. Again, I would never display him with that. As iconic as Michael Myers is, certainly Leatherface is on par with that. I would keep him with his leather mask and leave this off. But I mean, it's a nice added touch. It's one of those above and beyond, but just never really something you're going to ultimately use. So putting that aside, let's actually have a look at Leatherface. Now, I like the fact that I can go back and I can re-review some of the ones that I did in the past, kind of have a fresh perspective. Certainly I can improve on some of the shortcomings, as I can say, that I had with some of the earlier reviews. Sometimes my opinions could likely change on a figure. Sure, that's possible. Sometimes I can go back to a figure and think, yeah, I was kind of right the first time. I think the last time I did this figure review, last time I was looking at Leatherface, the one thing I commented on was, I don't know what it is about this paint that it just, right here specifically, the way it was painted up here works relatively fine because it's got the stitch work and everything, but right here, I don't know if it's specifically my figure, but it's too gooped on there. It's just a little too gooped on that it looks like just a big black blob of something. I think his face is relatively good. I would say on par with like the movie Maniacs Leatherface, which was also a released figure. The movie Maniacs is a little more on a movie accurate realism, where I think the Mezco unfortunately just is a little more cartoony. The details are all there and everything else, but it's a little more of a simplified version of the character versus what we would have gotten first in the movie, and then what we would have gotten also in the movie Maniacs figure version. You can see his eyes. It would have been nicer if they were just a little darker, that you couldn't quite make out the eyes as well as you do. Maybe that kind of hinders this figure a bit as well. You can see the hair and everything else that's parted where the stitch is, and you can even see too where the mask ends, exposing the human neck. Now, this does not remove, if anyone was wondering, it does not actually come off, and nor would you find a human face underneath. Pretty much this face is the only face you have. You can take it off. You can swap it out with Thomas Hewitt, but I'm more inclined to keep it as is. Other details, now, where I think the face suffers a bit, I think they did a really good job on the overall body and the coloring. He's got his apron on, that if you wanted to, you can't really remove it. I mean, you could break, there's just a little piece, let's zoom into that. There is just one small piece right here that, oh, you can actually, hey, look at that, I didn't realize that. There's a little snap. Now, I've taken it off. Will I actually be able to get it back on? There is, oh, I see what they've done. They've kind of kept it glued. Is it glued? Yeah, they kind of kept it glued underneath the mask. So you can have him with kind of his suit. He's ready to go to church. Very dirty shirt, I might add, but yeah, I guess they gave you the option to undo the apron, but really, if you can't take it off completely, don't tease us with the idea of removing it. Plus, I mean, it's iconic to have Leatherface with the apron on. That I'm not going to likely take it off and leave it off anyways. Some other details, aside from his really dirty shirt, I think the apron is done really well. It's aged. It's extremely dirty. You can see a lot of the tears and just the weathering and aging at the bottom there. Something else too that this particular Leatherface had that I don't recall the original Leatherface having is he had all like the rings and everything from his victims. Totally was blinging it out there. Wait, is that a Green Lantern? No, it's not a Green Lantern ring. That would be awesome if it was, but it totally isn't. And I actually like this wrapped kind of leather, I don't even know what you would call it, these leather forearm pieces that they've got on him. That's a nice added touch. Kind of modernizing the character while still keeping it in its roots. And then of course he's got his pants too. Now his waist, really aside from the swivel that he's got in his waist here, his bottom legs do absolutely nothing. They're just solid sculpted pieces, which is on par with even some of the NECA figures that we got, you know, back in the day. In the way, by the way, of his articulation, Leatherface has, I want to say, yes, it is a ball joint. It is a ball joint spot. He does have a pin and socket shoulder. They rotate all the way around. He has a bend in the elbow, which also rotate all the way around. He has a hinged hand, which also rotates. As I mentioned, he's got the swiveled waist, and then he's got nothing in the legs. Now, as much as the fact that you could rotate his waist here, unfortunately, just due to the fact that his apron is going to get snagged, when you start turning it too much, you're going to start putting pressure on it. Either pieces here could rip. Oh, and actually, speaking of, look at Spot discovering all these things. It wasn't actually glued to his hair. It was just tucked underneath his hair piece like that. So technically, you could take the apron completely off, but why would you? Why would you? Leatherface, to me, I always picture him more so in like this full decked out apron, splattered with blood, holding his chainsaw, which, let's see if we can actually get it in, and I would not likely have him displayed just with his shirt on. I mean, to me, that just does not personify Leatherface at all. The one thing I have problems with this figure, aside from the face is very simplistic, is his chainsaw is extremely, extremely hard to get in his hands. The one side isn't too bad. In fact, this hand might fare better for getting the chainsaw on, but I always seem to picture Leatherface with the chainsaw going this way as opposed to this way. This hand is easy enough, it's nice and open, but this hand I found is very prone just to staying shut. That you really have to pry it to get his chainsaw on his hand, or in his hand. For the sake of not breaking this thumb, because I know ultimately I might end up doing that, that essentially is what you would end up getting, him holding the chainsaw. Or you can kind of have him just holding in his hand, just kind of loose, just willy-nilly, like he's walking down the street, carrying his chainsaw. That's awesome. As a whole, he's not a bad figure. But with other options available, such as the McFarlane line, I mean, McFarlane line, the movie Maniac line, wasn't a spectacular line either, as par with, say, the NECA stuff that we're getting nowadays. But I think even comparing this figure to the movie Maniac's version, although he's hunched over and he comes with the open doorway diorama, it's just a better detailed figure. Even though this one has better paint, this one is much more cartoony, I find, in the face. I guess if you're looking for an upright version of the character, well, I guess your best bet is probably this character, or unless you want the prequel, the Leatherface remake prequel, then of course you can always go that route as well. Because I think there was a figure of that as well, released by, pretty sure it was NECA for that also. So, there you go. The Cinema Fear Leatherface, I'm going to give him, now that I have a chance to kind of look at him again, kind of look at him with a fresh coat of paint, I think I'm going to give him a 6.5. That may or may not be too high or too low in your books, but I think he's a good figure that suffers really only from the fact that his face is maybe just a little too simplistic. Today's throwback, however, we're having a look at the Mezco Cinema of Fear Series 3. We're looking today at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, Thomas Hewitt. Let me know your thoughts down below, guys. Maybe along the way you guys have picked this figure up as well, and share your opinion of it. Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.